Okay, hello everyone and welcome back. So now that I am feeling the Kenergy, I can finally post my review of the Barbie movie. I apologize that it's late. I know, my job is just to post, but better late than never. So today we're talking about Greta Gerwig's Barbie, starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. Barbie tells the story of Barbie, but not just Barbie, the myth of Barbie. The idea that Barbie ever symbolized everything it means to be a woman in this world. In the movie, Barbie Land is this place where men and women coexist peacefully as long as everyone plays their role with a smile. And within Barbie Land, there are outsiders, notably Alan, Weird Barbie, and a slew of discontinued Barbies, as well as a pregnant Barbie that people just kind of acknowledge but don't really want to be around. And although they're all presented to us as being different, like having different jobs, different occupations, they're all cut from the same cloth. Like every morning they wake up saying, hi Barbie, and that's to acknowledge each other. They will only acknowledge Alan if he says hi to them, but they don't really want to say hi back, right? He's not really part of the main crew. He's part of like the true outsiders in this society that unfortunately failed to meet the basic requirements. And one of the most impressive things about Barbie Land is the fact that there are no couples. Like, you don't really see them pair up until after Ken takes over. But before that, they're all kind of coexisting peacefully. Like, besides Ryan Gosling's Ken, the Barbies don't really care about the Kens, and the Kens don't really care about the Barbies. Like, no one is saying, oh, this is my Ken, or this guy belongs to me, or that's my Barbie. Like, they kind of just coexist quite peacefully. And I thought that was a really important detail, because the idea of Barbie and Ken is just so they're the perfect couple. Barbies end up with Kens, and Kens only want Barbie. So unless you fit this mold, then you're not good enough, right? This is the gold standard of couples, right? They live these perfect lives that are destined to be happy, and unless you look like that, well, tough luck for you. And I really like that they made Ken the dumb blonde, right? Like, when I think about Barbie, I think dumb blonde. Like, I've never associated Barbie with being a symbol of femininity or strength. Like, I'm not gonna lie, and the way Margot Robbie plays her, she seems very self-assured. She seems very confident. Like, even before this crisis, she seems to know what she wants, right? Like, although Ken was made for her, he's supposed to be her ending, she doesn't really accept it. She doesn't really go along with it. And in Barbie Land, the Barbies rule everything, right? They make the laws, they do everything, like, and the Kens are just Ken, right? They just exist there to be seen and not heard, right? Like, they don't really serve a function outside of this, it seems. And right from the start of the movie, like, Ken, Ryan Gosling's Ken, he seems unnerved, seems to be in a state of tolerable permanent unhappiness. He's only like relieved when Barbie acknowledges him. And Barbie, on the other hand, like, she's pretty good at being Barbie before this crisis. She seemed pretty content. Her goal was for everything to go back to normal, but nothing was really wrong. Whereas in Ken's case, like, he was never really good at being Ken. And I actually thought Ken's journey was really fascinating to watch, because he's designed to be with Barbie, and Barbie doesn't want him. And so outside of this, he doesn't really have a purpose. So he tries time and time again to get into her good graces, knowing that he will never really fulfill this purpose that, Mattel has assigned him. Things start to take a very dark turn in Barbie Land when Barbie, or stereotypical Barbie, starts to have thoughts of like death and dying. And we find out that the girl, or the woman who is playing with her, in this case Gloria, played by America Ferrera, is having a bit of a crisis of her own. So Barbie is tasked with going to the real world to basically find Gloria in hopes of essentially returning her, like restoring her factory settings, right? She just wants to go back to being ignorantly blissful. She's just tired of these thoughts. She doesn't really want to unpack them. She just wants them to go away. And so once in the real world, Barbie and Ken discover that everything they've been told has been a complete and utter lie. not only do women not rule the world, Barbie is believed to be a part of the reason. Ken, on the other hand, has this like come to Jesus moment. Like, he can't believe his eyes. And I really appreciated that the movie focused Ken's gaze on the men. Right? He never tries to replace Barbie. This is important to note. It's not like he goes back and tries to get all these girls, or he's like, oh my God, there are so many other options. Like, he is focused on the men, and he's really impressed by how different they all are. In Barbie Land, the Kens are the same. They don't even have occupation. In the real world, these men are all different. They have different occupations. They look different. He doesn't really know what that is, but this is the first time that he's seeing a possibility outside of being just Ken to Barbie. And a lot of Ken's, frustration actually has nothing to do with Barbie. Like, he is an accessory to Barbie. People do not buy Ken alone, right? They buy him they buy him along with Barbie. And I think he really just wants to feel the same level of love that Barbie does. Like, the people who buy Ken, I'm sure they love Ken, but they don't love him nearly as much as they love Barbie. And I think his desire to want to be with her is to keep that love, right? Like, to keep that energy going. Because outside of that, he can't really give it to himself, right? He's just Ken. It's like, I'd be discontinued if it wasn't for Barbie. So he latches on to the idea of patriarchy. And the word patriarchy is used so often in this movie that it honestly just becomes a joke. And I think that's the point. Patriarchy, feminism, they become such buzzwords that have lost all meaning. And to be honest, some of y'all know as much about patriarchy and feminism as Ken does. Let's take the word feminism. What is feminism? Supporting women's rights. Now it's become this weird buzzword to describe women who hate men. The word patriarchy, like, I don't know when that became commonplace. Like, you would not see that outside of a classroom. Like, that is a term you memorize for an exam. That is not a word to be used casually. I don't know who needs to hear that, but y'all be throwing around these words like you know what they mean. And, Ken, he thinks it's about horses. And I feel like a lot of other people do too. The other thing about these movements is that people have totally hijacked them for their own benefit, right? Like, this new wave of internet feminism, like, y'all, I am not with it. The manosphere, like, whether or not you want to hear this, there was a place for the red pill. There was a need for men to have spaces to discuss their issues, but now it's been taken over by these internet terrorists. And that's what Ken does, right? He takes this ideology in hopes of using it to get what he wants, right? To get support. But the whole thing is hollow and doesn't actually mean anything. He's unable to succeed in the real world because he needs qualifications, right? Like, he goes around saying, but I'm just a man. Just by virtue of being a man, I deserve the world, right? Like, I am man. And they're like, listen, sir, you are not qualified for anything. So he kind of gives up on the real world and decides to take this idea of patriarchy back with him to Barbie Land. As like, he kind of comes back as a messiah, and I guess everybody just kind of goes along with it because he was in the real world. Meanwhile, poor Barbie is having the worst time of her life. So while Ken feels seen, right? He feels seen. It doesn't matter that he's dressed crazy. It doesn't matter that he looks like he walked out of an insane asylum. People give him the time of day. They talk to him like a normal person. Whereas Barbie is exposed. She feels this sense of danger. People are looking at her like a piece of meat. Those police officers, like, she is not safe out here. And when she first meets Sasha, she's so relieved, right? She's like, I finally found this little girl that's going to set things right. And she is eviscerated by this little girl. And I think it's important to note that women can be more harsh to women, right? Like, the way we judge each other based on how we dress and what we look like is just ridiculous. Like, Nobel Prize winners do not look like Barbie. And the irony is Barbie isn't even dressing for anybody, right? Like, that's just how she dresses. And yet no one would give her the time of day. Nobody wants to listen to her. Nobody, like, no female that wants to be taken seriously dressed like this, right? And this is very much true in our society. Like, one of the things the film does quite well is it reclaims the color pink. Like, colors have even become politicized. Like, pink is a color of true femininity, right? Like, if you wear pink, you are a girly girl. And so if you want to be taken seriously, you shouldn't wear pink, right? So even, like, the irony being, the women who judge other women harshly for the way they dress, they're actually contributing to this, like, patriarchy they hate so much, right? Like, whatever happened to just dressing for yourself? And one of the most interesting journeys is the one that Sasha has. Like, at the beginning of the movie, she's scolding Barbie. She thinks she looks like a dumb blonde, right? She's like, you are a joke. I will not, like, I ain't giving you the time of day. And she would never be caught dead in pink. But as the movie goes on, you know, her style changes. Granted, by force, because she enters Barbie land, but, you know, you see her in pink, you see her comfortably wearing a dress. And this isn't about, like, oh, now I can embrace my femininity. It's more like the way she sees it has changed. No longer concerned with what other people will think, right? Like, her perception of things have changed, and therefore the way she presents herself to the world has changed. Poor Barbie is having, like, the worst time. She finally gets captured by Mattel, and even Mattel wasn't what she thought it was, right? She gets to Mattel and it's run by men. You know, she comes to realize that these are just men with pink ties sitting in pink chairs that don't really care about women and girls, right? And this was just really sad. They tried to put her back in the box. Like, that was a really eerie scene because I was pretty sure they were going to burn the box. Like, I was like, what are y'all doing to her back in the box? And so luckily she's able to escape. So she takes Gloria and her daughter back with her to Barbie land, thinking, like, that's what she has to do, right? Like, her job was to bring her back here and everything will go back to normal. Unfortunately, she returns to Barbie land only to discover Ken has turned her world upside down. Like, it is no longer Barbie land. It is now Ken land. So he has introduced he's introduced patriarchy. Everyone has gone along with it. And Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa House is born. And everything about Ken's patriarchy is, like, it's very performative. Like, oh, that's what men do. Like, drink beer and, like, chill out and have girlfriends. Like, that's an important part of patriarchy, right? Like, having a girlfriend for some weird reason. And the weird thing is, he introduced patriarchy as a way of finding purpose. I thought, you know, maybe he thought he was going to go back and finally things would make sense, but in the end, like, all the Kens and all the Barbies are still the same. They all just ended up doing the same thing. Like, there's no diversity even. Like, he's not able to really spin anything original out of it. And more so than that, he's still not able to get Barbie. And I thought it was so weird that he was still obsessed with Barbie. Like, I would think he would go back to Barbie land, get a new Barbie, and be like, you know what? I'm in charge now. Like, instead he tries to use patriarchy to get her to submit, right? He's like, girl, I guess you have no choice but to be my, what did he say, his long-term, long-distance, low-commitment, casual girlfriend. And of course she vehemently disagrees. She's like, I ain't doing all this, like, you out of your mind. And he starts to just chuck all her beautiful things out of the house. It was so funny that, like, Gloria knew exactly where these outfits came from. She's like, that's special edition. And we'll talk about that later, because Gloria is a fan of Barbie. Like, she is one of the people that bought into, I would say, the propaganda that is Barbie. So Ken is not able to get what he wants. Like, he's ruled Barbie land. He's days away. I don't know how they measure time in Barbie land, but he has taken over. And there's really no one to stop him but himself. But yet he still feels angry, right? Like, patriarchy is not able to give him any purpose. And one of the commentaries the movie makes so well is how it paints all men with the same brush, right? Like, in the end, like, they're also under the same pressure. And I thought that Matchbox 20 song that Ken sings is so perfect, right? There are so many lines in there that just really put us inside Ken's mind. One of the lines being, I don't think I've ever been truly loved by a hand that's touched me, right? Like, these people buying him, playing with him, they don't really love him. Or if they love him, they don't love him as much as they love Barbie. Something's gotta give, right? He's losing his mind. He doesn't know how much longer this can go on for. And I'm not surprised that Ken fell so easily into patriarchy, because how he interprets it is, I'm a man and I deserve it, right? Like, I shouldn't have to feel this way. And as someone who has tried time and time again to fulfill this purpose, like, this purpose was given to him by Mattel. And he can't really think outside of that. So he really feels like he's defunct, right? There's something wrong with him. You know, maybe I should be up there with the weird Barbies. Like, he really has this anxiety. Like, he thinks that there's something seriously wrong with him and he can't really get over that. And I think the point is, like, from a male perspective, like, what do you do if you're a man that doesn't fit into the mold? You know, like, you try time and time again, but nothing's really working out, right? Like, he's told that this is what it means to be a Ken, or what it means to be a man in Barbie world. And sadly, like, things are not working out the way he wants them to, and he just doesn't get it, right? In the song, he kind of expresses, like, why is it that you can't stand me? Like, why can't we just be miserable together, sis? Like, why is it that you can't even come near me? You know, like, maybe we can kind of work this out. Maybe things will change. Like, he just doesn't get it. Like, what is it about me that disgusts you? And it's not that Barbie is disgusted by him. She's just not interested in him, right? She doesn't use him as a sidekick. They were never boyfriend, girlfriend. They ain't even friends, low-key. Like, she's just like, sir, you need to find a new Barbie. Like, this has nothing to do with me. And again, it has nothing to do with Barbie. Like, he just has this desire to fulfill this role that he's been assigned. That's the problem with a lot of these ideologies, like patriarchy, feminism. Like, you need to figure out why you're latching onto the things you're latching onto. And people kind of latch onto these things in hopes of finding community and finding purpose, but all they find is confusion and chaos. And what Ken brings back is superficial, right? It's not getting to the root problem of why he's doing what he's doing. Like, where is all this angst? Where is this anxiety coming from, Ken? And so Barbie has totally given up. And I thought it was really interesting that Barbie's perception of herself starts to change. Right? Like, Barbie has never needed to be told that she's beautiful. She does not need to look in the mirror, right? Like, she has played her role perfectly, never been dependent on external validation, because she's always gotten it. So when she meets Gloria, when she meets Sasha, she starts to realize that actually the way she sees herself is not the way other people see her. And suddenly she doesn't feel that she's beautiful. She doesn't feel that she's worthy. Like, she basically starts to feel like Ken, right? Ken is like, welcome to my world. Like, that's how I feel pretty much every day. Like, sis, we could have just been miserable together. I'm not gonna lie, she's a better woman than me. I would have caved. Like, Ken was giving Kenergy, y'all. So I think it's important to know, like, our opinion of ourselves is highly dependent on other people. And so when they get exposed to the real world, you know, two things happen. First, they're exposed to, like, this world of, like, endless possibilities, but they're also exposed to what humans basically suffer from every day, right? Like, what is my sense of purpose? Why am I even here? I suck. Like, you know, all these thoughts of death, like, sis, that's every day. Now, for a doll, I imagine that would be highly detrimental. Like, I don't think they have the bandwidth to deal with that. So Barbie just gives up, right? She's just kind of over it. It's not until Gloria and her daughter Sasha come back that they kind of snap her out of it. So the way they're able to get Barbie Land back is to basically pit the Kens against each other. And the movie was really smart for this, because the whole time you're watching, you're waiting for a battle between the Barbies and the Kens, right? Men versus women. This is the movie where that's going to happen. And it never happens. It's never about men versus women. So they kind of play up this damsel in distress. And I thought it was so weird that the Kens, like, again, the purpose of Ken, it's an accessory to Barbie. So when they get control of Barbie Land, they kind of become Ken, like, overdrive, right? Suddenly they want to show Barbie everything. Right, their desire to help is just overwhelming. Like, oh, you don't know how to golf? Let me show you. Oh, you don't know how to read a book? Let me show you. Oh, you don't know anything about The Godfather? Let me tell you. Like, they just go into overdrive, right? Because they need that sense of purpose. Before, they just didn't really care. I thought it was really neat that suddenly all the Kens and Barbies were like coupled up. For them to rule, they need someone to, I guess, not necessarily like also to order around, but to, I guess, lecture to or be a parent. Like they become this weird guardian figure over the Barbies, or like father figure, right? Like, I'll tell you, you don't need to worry your pretty little head. And the thing about patriarchy is that it kind of, like, all men are not created equal in this system. Like, they're just not, right? There are some men that have more power over other men, and that's how the Kens kind of fall apart, right? Forget about the Barbies. I don't even care about the Barbies anymore. Ken decides he needs power over the other Kens, and the reason that he wants power is because Barbie showed this other Ken some affection, right? It's just ego. That's the thing. There's no logic to it. It's like, it's just ego driven. And within patriarchy, I mean, some of y'all men might as well have the same power as women, right? This is not a utopia for a man. It's like, at the end of the day, you can't coexist peacefully in this system, right? Somebody has to be in charge, and somebody has to be subservient. Battle of the Kens was so perfect, because this is the part of the movie where I felt things could have taken a dark turn, but they don't, right? Like, in the end, the Kens end up joining together, right? They band together. They accept that they might not be the best, but they're great at doing stuff, right? They are somewhat good. It was never about Ken versus Ken or Barbie versus Ken. It was always about Ken and Barbie versus these roles they've been assigned, and they're kind of waking up to that. They're like, why is it that we're doing this day in, day out? You know, like, why can't, as great as they are at playing their parts, they're playing parts assigned to them by outsiders, in this case Mattel. But this is not something they've chosen for themselves. This does not represent anything they care about. And so they've never really imagined a way of living outside of this. And so it was always against these roles, right? Like, a lot of these roles, you know, our dedication to playing them is just causing us more stress. And the only person that's unable to find peace is Ken. And I thought it was so funny that he almost committed doll suicide. Like, excuse me, Ken? Like, he is still trying to get with Barbie. Again, he feels like such a failure, right? He has this manifesto in his head, right? It's supposed to be Barbie and Ken, right? Like, this is what he's been told. This is the propaganda that he's basically subjected himself to. Barbie's like, you don't have to think like this, right? You can write your own playbook. You can create your own story. And it's not until that moment, until Barbie basically says, listen, like, I didn't know that you were in so much pain, right? She basically apologizes to him. And this, he really needed to hear this, because, again, he's so dependent on, like, external validation, because he just doesn't know what to do with himself. But it's like, why isn't just being Ken enough? You know, why isn't being just a man enough, right? Like, this whole thing about Ken enough, it's really like, why is it that we have all these standards? Like, why isn't just existing good enough? Like, okay, you're a man, you're Ken, that's enough. Why do you have to prove something by holding power over other people? And the amount of societal expectations we have on men and women is so unrealistic, and it's so much pressure. And, you know, keeping up with appearances, which Ken does, it just breaks people, right? It makes them feel inadequate, and he finally just lets go of all that. He's like, I'm Ken enough. And I love that wave at the end. He was just basically taking a bow. Like, Ryan Gosling, I hope he gets, you know, this part was really hard to play. He played Ken with such dignity and such respect, and I loved every minute of it. All right, so Ken finds some solace, and Barbie and Gloria also find some solace. So Barbie wants to be a real person, and her reason for that is because Barbie doesn't want to be the thing that's created anymore. Like, she's played this part perfectly, but she's played a part that she never had any say in creating. And now she kind of wants to design her own part. And this is really important in terms of Barbie Land. Like, Barbie Land is not actually diverse. They're all pretty much cut from the same cloth, and I think Gloria's speech is really important in understanding why. So they're trying to rally the Barbies. Gloria makes this fantastic speech about why being a woman is impossible. They're all expected to be cut from the same cloth. Deviate? Well, that's on you. We want you to be the same, but different, right? Like, y'all can have, as long as you are all, playing your roles with a smile, everything will be okay. And Gloria's speech was so spot on, right? Like, you can't be too fat, you can't be too skinny, you can't be a threat to other women. You're always performing, right? You're always like in these weird, you basically have to find a role that you can play and stick to it, as to not cause chaos and confusion to the people around you. But a lot of these standards that we're adhering to, again, we had no say in creating. We're just kind of forced into it. It's making us unhappy. And Gloria's speech basically encompassed that. She's like, why are we doing what we're doing? And Gloria is a fan of Barbie. She loves Barbie. This is important to note. Like, she bought into the propaganda of Barbie. And I can imagine that working at a company like Mattel, like, you come to realize, like, yo, these people don't give a damn about little girls. Like, let's just be serious. And, there's a reason why Will's character is there and why he was freaking out when these Mojo Doja Casa houses started to sell. Because marketing to boys is not easy, right? It's much better to market to little girls and women because you can expand on that, right? We're more susceptible to this type of marketing, and Gloria really was. And although she can't really do anything about the history of Barbie, she can maybe help use the power of Barbie to create something that actually does make people feel good about themselves. Like, again, the history of Barbie, it's, when you look at all the Barbies, like, yes, they're successful, yeah, they're doctors and lawyers, but they look a certain way. This is what successful people look like. If you don't look like this, then you don't deserve to be successful. Like, you have not worked hard enough. And so the subliminal messaging of Barbie, whether it be what you look like what it means to be successful, what it looks like to be successful, what a perfect relationship looks like all this is kind of eating away at you. And that's why Gloria's having this crisis, probably, because she's like, I've done everything right and here I am, like, why do I feel this way? It's so hard to be perfect in every area of her life, but it's draining her. And by the end of the movie, she's done with it. The movie ends with what I thought would be Barbie going to a job interview. Instead, she's going to see her gynecologist. So I guess before we figure out what she's made for, we gotta figure out what she's made of. Like, shout out to Greta for that line. So what's the takeaway of this movie? So this movie has grossed $1 billion, which is psychotic, by the way. Like, who knew this movie would be that successful? Like, whether or not you liked the movie or you didn't, you have to admit, like, this is crazy. Like, the amount of money that it's made is psychotic, and the discussions that it's generated. It's been fun watching commentaries. Like, I think people have been dying for something different, and a sign of good filmmaking is this ability to generate discussion. If you didn't like the movie, I respect you. If you liked it, great. Both sides are amazing. Now, in terms of Greta Gerwig, like, she literally smashed that glass ceiling. There's a scene at the start of the film where they're explaining the history of dolls and how dolls historically have been this tool used to prepare women for motherhood, and then Barbie came along and smashed expectations. And that's what Greta did with this movie, right? Like, the thing with Hollywood is that it likes to put people in a box. Like, you're our director for this, you're our director for this. But Greta said, I am all directors. I can direct anything. Like, don't put me in a box. And so I think that the takeaway should be that we need to stop putting our differences in the background and start putting them in the foreground. I've heard they've opened up the toy box, which is really unfortunate, which is the wrong lesson. Like, shout out to Hollywood. They're like, ooh, we can make movies about toys. We'll be good for another 50 years. Like, but again, I think people were dying for just good quality fun, like something different. So it's these $300 million movies that are sucking the soul out of us. Like, I hope more movies like this are made that do generate this type of discussion. I haven't even thought about Barbie for years, but now that I am thinking about her, I'm like, that she is problematic, and we do need to unpack that. Now, whether or not Greta did a good job of that, I'll leave that up to you. And yeah, you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.